Welcome to the podcast series, Astha Unplugged. The purpose of this podcast is to help you express your highest potential as a leader. Whatever it is that holds you back in your leadership journey, let's dive straight into it. So we'll bring in guests here who are leaders in their respective domains, and they are going to share perspectives from their life journeys. And these perspectives are going to help you get access and insights into your life journey. Yeah. So sit back and enjoy this week's episode on Astha Unplugged. Leader whose strength as well as passion lies in building high performing and engaged teams. And that really excites me because we're going to delve into that. But let me tell you, this man has 2 decades of experience in leading strategic initiatives, large programs, as well as pilot campaigns for major brands and across multiple geographies. So join me in welcoming Kevin Munshi, who's the Director in Technology for PwC Acceleration Centers, Kolkata. Hi, Kevin. Such a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Astha. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. It's really wonderful to have this discussion with you, and I'm so happy with this opportunity.
Lovely. Super. So, Kevin, I'm really excited about this one line where your passion lies in building engaged and high-performing teams. And I'm sure 2 decades is a considerable time. So what I want to start by asking you, essentially want to delve into managing conflicts at workplace, because conflicts are inevitable. However, they hold the capacity to paralyze the whole system if not taken care of, and kind of suck the whole energy from the setup, So the first thing that comes to my mind is, what is this one key ingredient that you would say which fuels up these conflicts? Nobody wants it. People sulk. They feel like a victim. And yet, it just keeps building up. What is that one thing which leads to the multiplication of this whole thing, the intensity and all?
So, Pastor, that's actually a pretty interesting question. Because to answer your question about what's the most important thing about a conflict situation, I think the biggest thing that I've observed over the years is not listening. There's definitely a situation where somebody's talking and somebody appears to be listening, but they're really not. The person is just getting ready to give their 2 cents. They want to give their point across. They are planning already in their head, okay, this is my point. I really need to make sure it lands. And they're really not listening to what the other person is saying. I think not listening is probably the cardinal sin of a conflict. And I think I learned this very early on in life. As you said, 20 years is a fairly long time.
Yeah.
And I started my career at a call center. And, just a regular headset jockey, putting on the headsets, you get about 40 to 50 calls a day. And I think most of my learning that happened about conflict management happened in those formative years itself. Because when a person calls you into a call center, they're really not calling to compliment you. They're not calling to talk about the weather. They definitely have a problem. They're already engaged in some sort of a dilemma. They probably have already had a bad experience by talking to someone else. And so when they land on your phone, they're already in a conflict mode. They are unhappy. And, it becomes my job back in the day to really hear the person out and make sure that I address their concerns. What I learned very early on during those formative years was you really need to let somebody speak. And you really, really need to let the person vent out the feelings. It's a very uncomfortable position to be in, because at that time you may feel like you're being pushed into a corner. You may feel like you're being trapped somehow. But in my experience, it's probably the best opportunity to understand the root of the conflict. Because when a person vents out, you are definitely getting a lot of information. You're getting data, you're getting facts, you're also getting emotions.
Yeah.
The key is that when you get all this information, how do you process it in your head? How do you make sure that you separate the information from the emotion? And once you get a very decent understanding of what's driving the conflict from the other person's perspective, I think you have a good place to start to try and negotiate and resolve your conflict.
Interesting. Okay. So absolutely resonates, Kevin, because I think everywhere, even in the personal spaces, a lot of struggle in relationships is because, we don't want to listen. Rather, we've never been taught to listen. A lot of people come with this whole thing of, I need to speak, I need to put across my stuff, but not been taught. So when you talk about this, take me through maybe some of the instances where you learned it the hard way, or certain things where you could distinctly see this difference that listening created. If there's something that you can talk about, how
Yeah.
have you evolved through that journey? So I've put in too many things there, I know, but something within this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as I said, when I started my career, it was at a call center, and at the call center, you automatically learn to listen.
Sure.
That's your most important skill in a way,
True.
because resolving the problem, technical, billing, whatever the issue may be, you have your knowledge guides and so on, and that takes care of that. But the people angle is something that you need to own and you need to take care of.
Mm.
There have been instances, of course, where you get it wrong. I think one instance that comes to mind was a particular situation where we were making a presentation to a client, and I think what we did was we prepared so much about the client, keeping one or two people in mind, we sort of forgot about the rest of the audience. And when we went into the meeting, we were so focused on just that one or two individuals that, okay, this is what this person wants, this is what this person wants to hear. We didn't really pay attention to the rest of the entourage. And turns out in that entourage was someone who was very senior and who had a big say in the matter. And when that person started speaking, we had no idea how to handle it, and we just were not prepared. So a big part of conflict resolution, I feel, is also being prepared. When you get into your conversations, it's imperative. I think even for a regular conversation, you need to have a fair bit of preparation done. And the preparation is not in terms of, okay, I'm going to land these points and this is how I'm going to, make sure that I win this conflict or win the situation. But it's about making sure that you understand your audience, that you really understand the personality that's involved, and you try to then, navigate the situation, because it's almost always a very fluidic situation. It's never defined. There's no, absolute rules that, okay, rule one will happen, then rule two will happen. It doesn't work that way. Everyone's personality is so complicated, and there's so much of information that you get when you discuss with people. So, in that particular situation, I think the learning that I took out of it was that you really have to firstly be very prepared for the audience that you're working or, working with. Also, in terms of from a conflict perspective, during that particular discussion, since we were not prepared, we immediately got into a shell. So we started to look at each other and we were like, okay, what's happening here? Who's supposed to speak? Who's not supposed to speak? What data do we present over here? So again, it comes back to preparation and dealing with that particular personality. I think I took my lessons from that and became a lot better in handling this sort of situations. I always ensured that I knew who the audience was that I was speaking with, and also try to understand the personality of the person. If we do that, I think that's at least a good place to start. And then, of course, once you get into the discussions, active listening, which I know is used very often as a phrase, but then it is a very important part of the entire conflict journey. It is very important to assimilate all the information that you get and try and do it in a very non-emotional way, which is very tough for us as human beings because we are wired for emotions. Uh, Something that I learned along the way also was about trying to understand yourself as a person. There are certain words, there are certain situations that are automatic trigger. You may hear certain things or you might see certain things. Like, for example, my favorite one is in emails you get, as you probably know, or as you know already, right? It's the moment you see that, you sort of feel that somebody on the other side is being a little bit passive aggressive about you, and they're trying to put you into a situation based on some discussion that happened in the past. And I think for a long time, and for many people that I've seen, it's sort of a trigger. They immediately get on the defensive. They're like, okay, what's happening here? Why is this person trying to get hold of me? Is there some hidden agenda here? And I think at that point, you have to learn who you are as a person and also be able to really know what are your triggers. And once you identify them, keep them in check. and learn how to keep your emotions intact without letting it spill all over the place.
Interesting. So when you have, let's say, a manager or a boss, and in a boss subordinate relationship, when maybe your boss is not listening to you, what do you think? What would you suggest, or how have you dealt with such scenarios, if any, where this was not happening and you didn't know how to cut through this whole conflict or the gap?
Yeah. So I think in a situation when you are in a discussion or in a conversation with someone who is superior to you, you have to keep a few things in mind. Firstly, you got to understand that the person who is superior to you has definitely a hold on you in terms of, he's your boss, he or she is your boss. You need to be very careful about, calling someone's idea bad. You definitely don't want to do any of that. What I find works more often with me, and and I've used it often in the past, is to try and appeal to a greater goal, a greater shared goal that both your boss and yourself are aspiring to. In a corporate situation, it could be a strategic initiative, it could be a tactical goal that you're both trying to achieve. And if you try and make that the center stone of your discussion, saying that, hey, we both know that we want to achieve this. I understand what you're saying. I think there's something else that I could do to make this better.
Yeah.
Or I could do something else that, can minimize your risk. If you can find that shared objective, especially in this sort of a situation, it really makes life a lot easier. Because then at that point, you're no longer combative, or you're not talking against each other, but you're aspiring for something better. And I think that's probably the safest route to take. And of course, then bring your points forward in a very deferential way. Make sure you have your data in place. What I find is most bosses are achieving a goal. They are looking to achieve something.
Yeah.
And that's the reason they bring forth their ideas. And if you hear them out, you give them some information, the data that speaks towards your point, I think they more or less do agree to your perspective as well.
Would you agree, Kevin, that within this kind of a setup, a lot of times people get into that zone of an expectation that where somewhere I think he's my boss and he's supposed to treat me in a certain way, and then I kind of shrug my shoulders and say, what do I do? And I stop making any efforts to even look at what I may be missing out on, or what more can I bring to the table. Like you mentioned, can I be well prepared, and can I focus on that larger purpose, the shared goal? And even if I'm not receiving the most desirable vibe from my manager, what more can I do to kind of make it conducive and all? So people just stop doing that in the expectation, oh, he's the boss, and if he cannot do it, what do I do? He's the authority figure, etc., etc. Yeah.
I think it's possible that you get into that mindset that, hey, my boss is right always, or at least I have to allow my boss to get his or her way. My only perspective to that is, the organization is paying you for your skills and your ideas, right? You're never hired just to be part of the system. You're not a brick in the wall. You are being paid to bring in your skill set, bring in your expertise, and that's again the higher goal, because if the organization wants you to be part of their team, you have something to offer. And I think it then just comes down to the individual to make sure that they bring forth their views in the right way. As I said, with any authority figure, there's a little bit of tactics involved. You definitely can't just swing the door open and barge in and say, hey boss, I'm right, you're wrong. Neither could you always be totally deferential. I think it's very important to build that relationship over time, where the authority figure sees you for who you are, the skills that you bring, and it's always about small wins. Whenever I join a new organization, or whenever I'm part of a team, a new team, I firstly always try to understand the dynamics of the team. I also try to understand the kind of relationship the authority figure has with his or her team. There are some bosses who are extremely people friendly, who will spend good amount of time having a lunch with the team. They may hang out with the team. There are some authority figures who keep a bit of distance. They prefer to keep a bit of distance with the team. They are approachable. They definitely, are there if required, but then they keep a bit of distance. I think it's important to understand the dynamics of the workplace where you are, and then see which is the best way to navigate it. There's definitely no one size fits all because not all bosses are the same, and you got to understand that every boss has their own personality,
Yeah.
and how you navigate is really up to you.
So where do you draw a line within this that where you feel that okay, I think I'm being too rigid and too focused on or taking it too personally, versus maybe here really my non-negotiables or my core values are being compromised with? Would you draw a line there, or I mean that's part of the corporate world, that's how it's supposed to be, or you must?
Part of the corporate world, yes. I think there is a point beyond which you don't push further. I think it's definitely important that you make your point felt, set across, share the data, share the information.
Yeah.
That's imperative on you. Have the discussions. Maybe if you feel you could do it again, do it again. But if there is absolute resistance, I would probably stop at that point. Not because the idea is wrong that I bring, but there's also a possibility there's information that I'm not fully aware of.
Okay.
Because at the end, as a corporate, there's a pyramid structure, right?
Yeah.
So the information is not always transparent at every single level. So it is very possible that your authority figure has a bit more information that he or she cannot share with you. And beyond a certain point, you can only ensure that you're heard, but then you've got to fall in line in terms of the overall picture.
Got it. Okay, so I think this you spoke in the context of you presenting an idea and whether it is accepted or not accepted. And a lot of times we take personally, my boss never accepts my ideas and stuff like that. However, if I take it to, let's say, a conflict kind of a scenario where I see a lot of leaders saying that, my boss or my manager is biased, and there's this whole term politics which keeps doing rounds, and then they it's kind of toxic and all of those things. Now, which is where how do I really draw a line and make my choices accordingly, that this is something where I need to look at myself. Maybe there's something that I'm missing out on, and maybe taking it personally. That's not what he means. My beliefs are kind of coming into play. Or I think I've given it my all, pretty much. And this is what it is. And maybe time for me to move on. Yeah. This is compromising with who I am, doesn't honor me.
Yeah. You have those environments, right? As much as you like to feel that everything works perfectly in the corporate world, you do have those situations where you are part of a toxic workspace. The key that I look at that is, toxicity is a perspective of yourself, in the sense that things may be happening, but what makes it toxic is going to be a perspective that you carry. And with perspective, there's an emotion to it. Your question reminds me of something that I heard. I think maybe it was Simon Sinek, I could be wrong, where they had this way of handling this sort of a situation, which they acronymed as FBI, which is feelings, behavior, and impact. That's something that I've tried in the past as well, and it comes out pretty well, actually. So the way it works is very simple. So if you are in a situation where you're really feeling that, okay, you're in a position where you're either being moved aside or sidestepped, or there's some sort of politics against you, I think it's important to have that conversation with your boss and use the FBI principle. So F standing for feelings. So you start off by saying, okay, I feel this. And you can't say I feel happy, I feel sad. It's not generic. It has to be a very, very specific feeling.
Sure.
Then you talk about the behavior. So the behavior could be that, hey, you know what? I was in charge of this project the whole while. I was almost done with it. And then you handed it over to someone else, and that person got the credit. So that was a behavior. Sure. And you talk about the impact. And it's very important that you have all three. You cannot just have feeling and behavior and forget about the impact. The impact is very important because you need to then say that doing this has made me feel redundant, or it makes me feel disillusioned with my workplace, or it makes me feel that I don't want to stay anymore, right? So feelings, behavior, and impact, if we follow that, and I've seen people use it in different combinations. It doesn't have to necessarily be you start with feeling, then behavior, then impact, but all three have to be there. And I think that sit down conversation with your boss, if you have all these three elements, is always a good place to start. And this doesn't always necessarily have to be with a boss. It can very well be with a peer. It can also be with a subordinate. So I use it quite often, I should say, with my subordinates. Let's say if someone who reports to me is habitually late for a meeting, you can probably talk to the person once or twice, but then you need to understand what's actually happening. And that's when you bring in this particular perspective that, I feel disconnected from you when you don't come on time for the meeting. And the impact of this is I start losing trust on you, right? Once you bring that in, I've always found that it strikes a note with the other person. Because by and large, it's my belief that people want to do well and want to be part of a collaborative structure. Nobody's out here to be Superman, Batman, or anything. And then, especially in a corporate structure, the more integrated and matrix we have become, we all have dependencies. Every single thing that we do is dependent on someone else, be it an authority figure, be it a peer, be it another team. Your success depends on how well you collaborate.
Absolutely.
And FBI is an acronym that I'm definitely stealing from Simon, I think. But then I found that very useful in the past. It's something that I do. And, it's definitely gotten me a lot of results.
Lovely. Any instance where, you would, so where you communicated, you had this conversation and you realized over a period of time, it's not about 1 second where you just feel something, but over time you realize that despite doing certain things, this is maybe not working out, and then you adopted something else, or, how did you kind of navigate through that situation?
Yeah.
Anything that you can recall?
Yeah,
the reason why I'm again coming back to how you dealt with certain things is because I feel a lot of times these are things which people are dealing with, a lot of leaders out there, and one thing that comes in is no, this is not possible. Oh no, this cannot be done. And while there is so much information out there, but I feel that's what's really implemented, which is what you would have done, is the real talk. Otherwise it's all gyan. I don't know how to implement that. So that's why
I think I've been in this situation a couple of times in my career, where I've been as transparent as I can about what I felt, the behaviors, the impact that was there.
Yeah.
And I still didn't feel I was getting the right results. I still felt that I was still not getting the satisfaction of seeing things change drastically now. There's always two options at that point. To me, the first option is, as you rightly said, people say, okay, you know what, I'm done with this place, let me walk on. Right, let me move on. Let's go somewhere else. Maybe life is better there. So in my particular case, I haven't done a lot of that. What I've done instead is I've always tried to look for the other opportunities which are available within that particular organization or that department. Because I would hate to label an organization as toxic. You can never say that an entire company is toxic, or you can't say an entire department is toxic. More often than not, it'll be a very, very small group of people who are indulging in certain behavior that's not really great. As a professional, you do face these sort of situations, and the best way, after you've done everything, is to probably look for opportunities around you within the organization itself. So maybe it's another department, maybe it's another role. Maybe it's also about just upskilling yourself in terms of taking on additional responsibilities, and that takes you away from that situation. I would love to say that we could fix toxicity in the workplace, but it's, in my experience, you don't always get that done. You can make things better. You can definitely negate a lot of this, but can you change people completely and overnight? I don't think that happens. Or rather, if it happens, it takes a lot of time. And more often than not, we are not willing to invest that amount of time, because at the end, I've seen so many situations where, the leader who's creating the toxic environment is basically found out by his superiors. I've seen situations where leaders have been moved to other roles because, it became very apparent that they were indulging in this sort of behavior. So, it is an option, and it's an unfortunate option to take. But I do think that, beyond a certain point, if you're compromising on yourself, if you're compromising on your physical or mental well-being,
sure,
then it's never worth it. Beyond a certain point, you need to be responsible for yourself. The world is a pretty large place, and you can definitely bring your skills and expertise to a team or a department or an organization where you're definitely careful. And I think that's imperative that each professional takes up that responsibility for themselves.
Yeah. Who do you need to be, as you talk about all of this? You spoke about FBI as a tool. You spoke about I'm getting that flavor of who do you need to be within all of this. So who has Kevin been, through this whole journey where you had all kinds of things and you said, no, I'm not labeling the organization as toxic, and I have the consciousness to even look at what more and this person is doing this and maybe a lot of other things. So who do you need to be, and who does anybody need to be, so that you can really be high on energy, take charge, enjoy working, maybe here, maybe elsewhere? I mean, kind of just navigate through it.
So to me, the way I look at it, the path of least resistance as a person is to be yourself. Right? I've never tried to be somebody who I'm not. So when I say be yourself, so the person that I am, I'm probably a person who is slightly introverted. I'm not necessarily a person who's the life of the party. So I don't pretend to be that, right? Similarly, at the same time, I tend to be a little bit more analytical in my response. I don't necessarily fly off the handle. So when people around me are all losing their cool, I'm probably the guy who's calm and who's just like listening, taking in information, processing it, observing people's behavior.
Yeah.
I think as a person, regardless of which organization I've worked with, I think every boss has told me you're pretty hard to read as a person. You're very quiet. You just get work done somehow, but you don't seem to be talking a lot. I'm like, well, I talk pretty fine with people, I think, but I don't need to be the diva on the floor. I don't need to be the guy who's getting all the attention. I'm perfectly happy letting someone else take that attention while I get my work done. Um, I think it's important to be yourself. I mean, the long-winded answer is just to be yourself, because when you are yourself, you are most comfortable with who you are. You're most comfortable with your behavior. You're most comfortable with what's coming at you, and your reaction or your response back is also the most natural. If you be someone else, you're not going to give the right response, and you'll be possibly very inconsistent. And inconsistency is an attribute, I think, that really doesn't work. Be as a manager, as a leader, I'm totally fine if I have a boss who's extremely data driven or who's extremely aggressive, but just be consistent. Don't be data driven, don't be aggressive the next day, don't be his best friend tomorrow, and then again be data driven and aggressive the next day. It's a little bit hard to put together. I think as part of leadership qualities, consistency is the key. Because even your subordinates are looking for a consistent approach. They need to know that if I approach Kevin, he's not going to bite my head off, because he's never done that in the past. He's not likely going to do it today as well. And I can approach this person. And if they have a consistent experience with you, that's where a lot of trust is built. Because then they say, okay, this person behaves in this way. This is what his expectations. I know what I need to do. I will try and meet them, and I will work very hard to try and make it happen. And I think if you can do that, I think generally everything else starts falling in place.
Nice, interesting. So, Kevin, how did you go about this, or did you really consciously go about a journey of maybe self-work, or looking at who do I need to become when you say being yourself? Because I know we all have our limiting beliefs about our own selves, which we're carrying on from maybe early on, and they have a massive impact. And so have you taken a formal path, like a conscious one, that I need to do this, or you keep doing that periodically? How does it work?
A little bit of both. So I think, the first couple of years of my life, the organization that I worked with, it was a fantastic organization in terms of the leadership. And I count myself very, very lucky that I was part of that organization. it wasn't just that you had one or two bright stars. You had some really, really great people to work with, and people from different industries. So finding myself was pretty easy early on for me because I saw a lot of different behaviors, and there was some that I resonated with, and there was some that I just didn't resonate with at all. And I think a lot of the Kevin of today is based on what I've learned and picked up in those early years.
Sure.
So what happens is once you pick up these behaviors or these mindsets, over time you start implementing and building on that foundation. So let's say if you are as a person, a people person, let's just to use a very used term. If you're a people person, you're friendly, you are approachable, you love to get out with people, have a good time with them. You also learn the limits of that if you continue to do that. Because, for example, you can be very, 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 very easily misconstrued as a guy who just doesn't care about work and he just wants to chill out with people, which is not the case. So the more consistently you implement your behaviors and you walk into situations and exhibit those behaviors, you also start finding where are the limits, where you realize that, okay, this is not working anymore, you need to pivot a little bit. I think it is the first 6 to 8 years of any person's life, you're learning the most in a corporate world. Because your mind is like a sponge. You're just out of college. You're open to pretty much anything. If you're exposed to good behaviors and the right mindsets, it's probably going to get inculcated very easily. And then as you move on and you start exhibiting the same and you start getting the outcomes you want, it hardens into your mind. And you start saying, yeah, this is it. This works for me. I continue doing. So for me, it's been a journey of picking up these mindsets early and then implementing it consistently across my entire tenure in organizations.
And picking them up from the mentors that you had, the leaders that you worked with?
It's definitely the mentorship and the leadership that has a big play at this particular point, because I remember when I was younger, at the start of a career, you are so eager to please, right? You are so eager to do well.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time for you because you probably are earning money for the first time. You have your own financial independence in a way. And at that time, you really want to know everything that's there in the world.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to have leaders who definitely, had a bit of gave me a guiding light in a way. They definitely showed me, things that worked, and I also saw things that didn't work for them. And as a person, I really think, and if there are viewers who are younger and at the start of the career, I really think it's important to have a learning mindset in those early years. Absorb whatever you can and find what resonates with you. So for me, it was definitely leaders and it was mentors. That's something that I've taken forward with me as well. So I think that by the time I was in my second or third organization, I made sure that I was part of the mentorship team. I was part of the leadership team any which way. But then I wanted to make sure that I could give people the right messaging, give them the right behaviors that worked. And if it resonated with them, great, they could pick it up and they could take it forward into their careers. Because that's part of being a manager and a leader in an organization. You need to also be able to cultivate and harness the potential of people who are under you, and make sure that they achieve their successes. So I think that's what worked for me in general.
Lovely. So what's your, if amongst all the things, what's your one, you may call it punchline, tagline, mantra, which is like you don't have to recall it, remember it, it's just there. Maybe about your own self, maybe about workplaces in general, life in general, which helps you steer through, navigate through life, or maybe even the work life, if specifically I need to.
So one tagline for work life and personal life, is it? Well, I think, if you come into work and making a difference, I think if I have to make it just one tagline, make a difference. I think that's the most important thing. If you can, at least for me, because and I got this tagline very early on in my career because I'd won an award, if I remember, and somewhere the trophy was there, and somewhere there it was written, "Leave your footsteps behind." I think it was a tiger award or something of that sort. And they had a paws of a tiger and all. They're very cute. But then, yeah, it just said, leave your footsteps behind. And that resonated a bit with me. And I'm like, yeah, okay, makes sense. So you make a difference over here. And people know the work that you've done. And, every day if you come into office, you make a difference to the people that you work with. You make a difference towards your strategic objectives and goals. And you make a difference in every interaction if possible. Part of the reason why I thought, appearing on the podcast is a good idea, because, maybe there's a bigger outreach of people who may pick up something from my career so far. And if there is, then wonderful. Why not? So, I think making a difference is the most important thing. I think it works in their personal life as well.
Yes.
Because every one of us have roles. We have multiple caps. Someone's a mom, someone's a dad, someone's a caretaker, somebody's, a father, a mother, be the case. And, if you can make a difference to your personal life as well, it puts you in that happy place. And I think that always translates. I always believe that a happy home and a happy workplace is ideal. You really want to get there. Sometimes one or the other doesn't fire too well, but keep aspiring to make it better and make that difference.
Wow. Lovely. Love that. So there's so many nuggets that I got from you, and I'm just going to quickly go through them. If I miss out on anything, which, you pointed out, and maybe I missed noting it down, do point out, do let me know. So I think you started by talking about not listening as one of the big misses when it comes to conflicts or relationships anywhere, but since we're talking workplace scenarios, so that's where. And you said, let people speak, because I think one of the core needs is we all want to be seen and heard. So hear people out, let them vent out, and that pretty much does it all. You spoke largely about preparation. I think in a lot of different points, you spoke about how important it is to be prepared, whether it's a team meeting, or it's a one-on-one with your boss, or even if it's a conversation in the context of a conflict. Be prepared with stuff, right? And keep your emotions aside. So I think that's a very important. And I see so many people getting so emotional about it, anything which is happening at the workplace. And I think it's a very, very important one. And yes, missing out on that bigger, larger purpose and just getting caught up in the trivia. I think when you say that, always connect to that larger purpose. And when you're talking to your manager also, that if you're coming from there, then it's easier to connect. So I think that's a very, very powerful one. When you said, Kevin, that what's the value that you are creating? Organization pays you for the value that you're creating. And I can't tell you the number of leaders who say, I'm not valued by the organization. I'm not acknowledged by my leadership, by my boss. And that's one of the big pain points. And in the masterclass, I think we do a poll as to how many of you feel not acknowledged. I can't tell you a vast majority, almost 80, 90% of the people say, yes, I'm not acknowledged. And therefore I feel like poor me. And I think this is bang on, that can we take charge? Organization has no personal connection with me. It's not in the business to employ us there. But if I can come and take charge and create value and look at creating excellence there, then, it's about that. So I think everywhere, one thing that I saw, there was a pattern in what you were talking, and that was around what can you bring to the table, which is also your tagline, punchline, or your mantra, which is making a difference. What can I bring to the table and what value can I create? And I think that's the essence of what you said. Having discussions, sharing the idea. You spoke about having this clear distinction between one scenario where I'm sharing something not accepted, that's okay. I can explain my perspective, not accepted, okay, but then do not take it personally. It's okay. At some point, I need to be able to let it go. So that's another one. Also, I loved what you said about the whole toxicity. Such a loosely used term these days, toxic environment, toxic boss. And then you said it's a perspective. And thank you so much for FBI. All those of you who are listening, I think what Kevin spoke about, feelings, behavior, and impact, and how you bring that in Cannot miss any one of these, either of these. All three need to be there. This is how I'm feeling. This is how it has impacted. So sorry, this is how I feel. This was the behavior. And then this is the impact that I'm going through. The clarity that I have as I talk about it, and then communicating it to the other person, I think very powerful. And a lot of times we keep everything to ourselves. There's so much of fear and insecurity there. No, let me not speak. So I'm sulking also, being a victim, and I'm not speaking up also. And that just piles up, keeps piling up. So that's...
If I could just comment over that, I think, when we don't do this sort of makes you very passive aggressive at work. When you don't talk about your feelings a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because, we walk a very thin line in corporate because, if you look at it very closely, you have to be very careful about your feelings. You can't really explode your emotions on somebody.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as a human, you have to be able to express yourself with decorum, in a professional way. But you have to bring in your feeling into the equation, especially when you're into a conflict, because if you're all giving feedback, FBI works great for a feedback situation as well. So, you have to bring that element into it. And, it's important to do so, because if you don't, as you rightly said, you start keeping these things inside and you start bottling it up. And then it's going to start coming out in a very passive aggressive way, which is the worst problem.
Yeah.
Because then you're not only the guy who doesn't come up with ideas, you're probably the guy who doesn't let others do them, because you're now becoming passive aggressive. You're not, not really sharing. You're probably becoming a little sarky. You're sending off those weird emails.
Yeah.
And then you come across as a difficult person, and that just makes your situation worse. It doesn't make you in any way more popular. And, it's important to have these very candid and open discussions, because if you don't, then you're just you're setting yourself up for a failure down the road. And I've seen it happen too often in life that, people who are probably a little bit hesitant to bring out their emotions, or they feel, kya hoga, kuch nahi hoga, there's no point in bringing it up, it's already done, I don't care. Those people are the first to lose out. They are the first to lose out on the bonuses, they're the first to lose out on the promotions, they are the first to lose out on great projects. And eventually they come to a point where they have just become totally disillusioned with the organization, and they say, okay, I need to leave. And of course, everyone looks for that 30% increase in their hike. And the market in India, at least, is pretty good at the moment. You get that very easily, you move on. But you haven't learned anything from your organization, and probably have taken a lot more emotional baggage into your next organization. And you're going to start working off that, which is more unhealthy. So, I really do believe that it's a very important, especially since everybody that you deal with is a person at the end, regardless if they're a boss or a superior, a peer, or a subordinate.
Yeah.
It's all people. So the better you get at handling or working with people, the more successful you will become.
Since you brought this up, Kevin, so what would you say, where do people start? People are not good at labeling their feelings. They don't even know, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling bad, I'm feeling angry. That's the 3-4 words in the vocabulary. That's it. To be able to go and express, oh no way. Where can somebody start to build up the muscle so that they can do it consistently?
So if you're a person I hate to use the word introverted, because that's not the right thing here. But if you're a person who's probably a little shy, or you hold back your emotions, I think the first thing you need to do is be able to at least speak to your friend at work. And, at minimum, because at least if you have a friend at work, a person who you can just bounce this emotion off, saying that, what, this meeting didn't go well. I missed out on that thing, but the boss or somebody else just humiliated me in front of the entire group, and I didn't like it. If the friend that you're speaking to is actually a friend, he or she will be able to give you, firstly, a sounding board. It'll also bring a lot more courage for you to speak up about your feelings. I think it's one small step, but I do believe that you need to have that friend at work, and you need to have that confidant who you can speak with. Also, when you do so, you get another perspective, because it's quite possible that you have misunderstood the entire situation because of the negativity that you carry. Because if you have taken it to heart that, okay, my peer is out to get me, and he's competitive, and he just one-ups me every single time, you go into your meetings, you go into your discussions with that mindset, and it'll happen, it just reinforces it again. And then you come away feeling worse. But from the other person, if you start sounding it off to at least a friend at work, he or she might very well say that, you know what, you should have just brought up that point already. It was your presentation. It was a very obvious point. Why didn't you bring it? Maybe your preparation wasn't that great. You could have prepared a little bit better, or you could have done a little bit better research. You know, and that's another perspective to get. And it's a pretty low impact discussion because you're not running the risk of causing hurt feelings anywhere. But you get those little nuggets from people who work with you. And I think that's the first step. I really do think that, you know, as a human being, we are very, very collaborative in nature, and people are there to help you. I've very rarely seen people who just walk away from helping somebody. They want to help. They help in different levels at different capacities, but you know, people generally want to help you a little bit at least. So yeah, I would start with that. Make sure that you don't, you know, take all the burden on your head, carry it around like a heavy stone all day. It's just not helpful. It's just going to ruin you physically and emotionally. So a friend at work is a good place to start.
Yeah, but make sure you choose the friend wisely. Not somebody who's like, oh yeah, I understand, how bad, how mean, who's like so who can actually be very transparent and be willing to give you like an honest feedback, you know. So
and you can also ask for feedback. I mean, if you feel that if you're not getting the result that you want, there's nothing wrong with asking for feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's always the third option, which is make friends with your antagonizer, right? The person who antagonizes you the most, why not just make friends with him?
Yeah.
I recall situations in my life where, you know, I'm fairly competitive as a person, and you know, I always try to do very well, or at least better than most.
Yeah.
But if you do come across that one or two individuals who really raise the bar, and you realize that, okay, you know what, this guy does things better than me, faster than me, with better quality than me, I can take two or three options. I can first of all resent that person and do everything I can to pull him down. Or I could just say, yeah, you know what, this place doesn't work for me. I'm just going to run away. I'm going to go to another department. I leave the organization. Or the third option is make friends and say that, you know what, you are at a high level. I'm not there, but I would love to get to your level and observe, learn, see what you can do, make changes in your own behavior, see where the differences in the quality of work, try and understand how the person gets speed. You know, that's always a third option. And this is rooted in our human psychology. This is not something that works in corporate. I mean, we as humans can either, you know, fight or flight, if you remember. So it's you either want to fight with the person or you want to run away from the person. And the third option I think that works is make friends. So, you know, try and work with that person. Maybe you learn something. And quite often I have seen that people who have very good skills also automatically are quite okay to mentor people. They are not necessarily, you know, trying to be that one-man army. Because as we talked about earlier, in an organization these days, there's no one-man army concept anymore.
Absolutely.
You need to work with people. You have to have that connect with your peers. You have to be able to collaborate. And the people who are successful these days is the person who collaborates best, who networks the best.
Yeah.
And the higher up you go in the organization, it matters more. At an early stage, let's say when I was taking calls, I didn't need to talk to anybody. I could very well just come to my seat, put on my headset, take my 50 calls, go home. And that was it. And I get paid for it. Today, I think I spend more than half of my time in collaborating and networking with my peers and with people who are maybe a level above me, because that's where the strategic ideas are coming from. That's where you want to understand the pulse of the organization. That's where you want to know what are the opportunities. That's where you really want to know how do you, you know, further your career. And that's an important part of, you know, making yourself successful in an organization.
Wow, love that. What that brings to my mind is who you are being, Kevin. And no wonder then what you have as a result of who you are being, they're absolutely in sync. So what an amazing perspective. I can resent that person or I can just make friends with him. And then what you do, you network, you go meet people. Whereas for all those of us who kind of sit and be in our shell and think, no, he's this, he's that, he's not favoring me, he's biased. And it's not these people out there. It's you who need to kind of look at who you are being, and then as a result, how is it impacting you? So I think this is so powerful. Love that. Love that. Yeah. So I think what Kevin just mentioned, I would just want all of you to take this on and reflect on this. I think this is very, very powerful, where you also spoke about being yourself. How comfortable am I being myself and being consistent in who I am, and being very, very conscious of who I am being. Am I being that victim and pointing fingers at everybody and finding, what's missing everywhere in every situation, versus I'm looking at what you said, make a difference. How can I make a difference? How can I create a value? I think, to my mind, this is what I am taking away from whatever you shared, Kevin. This is like the big one for me, and absolutely brilliant. Not because it's like, wow, what a speech, but because I think this is what you've lived and what you spoke about. And this is where I see a lot of us struggle. I mean, I've struggled with that for the longest time, where being myself was a big deal for me. So I think being yourself and then making a difference. Lovely. Superb. Great. Any last words that you want to share, Kevin, with respect to workplace relations, leadership journey, the corporate journey, anything that comes to your mind?
Well, I think if I could just summarize my perspective,
Yes.
the way I look at it in a very simple way.
Yes.
You spend 8 hours of your life at minimum these days,
Mm.
the maximum,
Yeah.
at minimum at work. Everyone at work is a person. Everyone has their own personalities. They have their own dynamics, and you are always in charge of your career. There's no one else who's going to take care of it other than yourself. And once you accept that, it's the right way to go forward. And I also really do believe that you need to live in the moment. Make sure that you bring your best self to work every day. Be it remote working, be it actually in office. Make sure that you make the day count in a way. And if you do that consistently enough, the results come. I have seen so many people, so many of my peers who are successful in different organizations, different roles, be it technical, be it functional, be it whatever you call it. But the behaviors that make them successful are pretty common. It doesn't really matter about the job that they do, whether they are in manufacturing or IT or in textiles or anything of that sort.
Sure.
It's just about the right behaviors that you bring, do it consistently, and I think the results follow. And if and when you see that you're not getting what you need, stay true to yourself and make those small 2 millimeter shifts in personality and perspective, and you will be successful.
Wow. Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. And
Sure.
I love the ease and the consistency with which you just pass on the most effective and the most profound messages out there. The whole being of yours is just so amazing, so powerful. So thank
I'm
you
in
so much.
Zen mode, is it?
Zen mode. You said it. Absolutely. So thank you so much. This was really meaningful. This was very profound, real talk. And I'm sure, I got a lot for myself, my little 2-3 highlights, which I definitely got from you. Thank you for that. And I'm sure all those people who are going to be watching this and listening to the podcast will definitely have their stuff which they'll be able to relate with. They will have their actionable points. So yeah, loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
so much too. It was a pleasure. It was absolutely a pleasure talking to you today.
thank you so much. And I would request all of you, those of you who watch this, who listen to this, if there's anything that comes to your mind, there's further a follow-up question that you have, please put it down below in the comments. And, Kevin, would you be okay if we can bring those questions to you and you may want to answer or something like that?
Sure.
Yeah. And
Really
we'll
my
also, yeah. Oh, lovely. And we are also going to tag Kevin. So, you can follow him on LinkedIn and yeah, connect with him if you want. So that's about it. Thank you so much for being here, Kevin. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Lovely.